Hey, welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Lori Cordles, parent of three in three different life stages. One is launched, one is in college, and one is in high school. And I am a parenting educator. And today we are going to talk about the research and the reality around parenting school-agers, or sometimes we call it middle or late childhood.
Yes, or elementary age, or I
Elementary
feel like
age.
this is the one that's like weird. Like all of the other ages we talk about, it's like you're a toddler, you're a preteen, you're middle
And you know, I
school.
have been struggling with those words. Like, what words are they?
Yeah, she's like middle and late childhood.
Yes,
We can
middle
say
and
it.
yes,
That's why we
elementary
say.
school. Anyway, that's
why
what
we
we're
just
talking
say
about.
School-agers, right?
Yes,
It's just easier.
it is.
So yeah, we're talking this season all about the different ages and about the skills and the things that our kids are working on at different ages from birth all the way up through early adults. And as we look at this, looking at some of that research, we're talking about our typically developing kids, but we know that every kid develops at their own pace, right? Some might be a little early, some might be kind of right on time, and some might be a little later. But our role today is just to provide some research based information to help to allow you to make informed parenting decisions.
Yes, and remember that there are many factors that impact the rate of development in children. One, of course, is being that there's temperament involved, right? Season 3, all of it, all that temperament information impacts the development of our children. And other things include the environment that they're in, their genetics, all kinds of things.
So
And so, if
much.
you do have concerns about your child's development, we do recommend that you talk with your family healthcare provider or reach out to a local area education agency.
Yes, lots of really great resources to tap into that want to help us on with our kids' development.
They do. And we actually maybe also recorded a short little bonus episode on how it feels to be a parent of a child with special needs. Because
Not all kids are typically developing.
no, they aren't.
Mhm.
And as we went through this season, I kept thinking, I want to talk to those parents that sometimes feel like I do. And so you'll have to look for that in our podcast list. But let's
Yes.
kick things off by simply defining what age and stage we're talking about today. So this is the ages between 6 and 11.
There is this line of, okay, we say early childhood is like preschool, and then mixed in here together when we put together school age is that middle and late childhood. So some debate, but basically school age, right? School-ager.
School age, 6 to 11 in there. So as you think about the 6 to 11-year-old, what do you think is the main task that you see for this age?
I feel like it's the word I always say in all of our episodes when we're talking about school-agers, mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're working on their skills and they're like getting good at stuff. And, I think of in school, in early childhood, we do a lot more of just like kind of learning social rules and some of the beginnings of learning. But now that kids are a little older, they can handle mastering some stuff, right? I think of
Mm-hmm.
like math facts or like shooting a basketball, right? Like their physical stuff. And so I just think like even like making friends. So there's all
Yes.
these skills that they're working on mastering. So much of
Mhm.
their world is about like getting good at stuff. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think
Yes.
of?
Okay, so I thought of a word, and I can't decide if that word is because I had an incident with this word during this age
Okay.
frame or not, but that word is branching. They're branching out. They're going outside of our own family unit more
Mhm.
often and for longer periods of time. They're branching out on the things they try. They may try to climb branches and fall off of branches and encounter the health system for the first time in their life at this age, right?
Am I getting a hint of that incident with branching?
Branching, Lori and branching. Yes, we still talk about it to this day. So
I like
anyway,
that word.
yeah, They're branching out away from
Yeah.
us.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
so we talk about different domains at these ages, and that's what we're looking at, especially during this season, are these different categories, these milestones, the things that commonly occur during these ages. And so, as we look at these different categories, we've been walking through kind of the specific, typical, again, things that might be happening. And remember,
Mhm.
not all kids are going to deliver at the same pace. So, ask
Mhm.
questions from your healthcare providers, from your schools, from your administrators, your teachers, colleagues, and friends. But let's look at this first category, physical development. And this is where they really begin to see an increased coordination of small and large muscle movement. Kids are trying their hand at different types of physical activity, whether it might be a bicycle or group sports, swimming, soccer, things like that. Patterson calls this the most active period of life. It's where we encourage kids to get outside and play and explore the great outdoors.
Definitely. Outdoor play, I feel like is such a huge part. Like, right, like just go outside and play. You're
Hmm.
playing ball with the neighborhood kids or whatever it is. Like, yeah, most active. I loved that quote of like the
Yes.
most active part of life. You're busy, you're exploring now that you're more coordinated, how your body works and the things you can do. Love that. Yes, and so our text that we are kind of leaning into, of course, we're always looking at the research, but talking about kids' development. For school agers, we're leaning on this text by Patterson that has all kinds of good info on our kids' development. So, our next domain or category is looking at kind of the cognitive, the language. Sometimes we call this the thinking domain of development. And so, one thing to understand about our school agers is that they're getting a sense now of being able to understand other people's perspectives. So we
Mm.
talked about our preschoolers are still pretty egotistical, like, but now our school agers are starting sometimes, but not always, right? They're not
Hmm.
always doing this, but they're getting the skill of being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes. This can help
Right.
make them a more empathetic friend or sibling, but they're learning about all that. But that also means that they're like, "Okay, wait, like, mom and dad, when you make rules for me, like, why? Like, what's that? What's going on with that?"
Hmm.
And so we also need to, like, make sure we're explaining our reasoning, and all of those kinds of things. They need a little more explanation, which also goes along with the second tidbit about their thinking or cognitive domain is that they're starting to, what we say, increase their processing speed, which sounds
Yes.
so like they're not a computer.
They're not
Um,
a computer. They're
but
starting to be very quick witted.
yes, quick-witted, quick thinking, sometimes maybe just like a little back talk, right? It comes out quick. They're thinking of a response a little faster. But I like I said, I have young kids and I very much look forward to the day I can give multi-step directions
Yes.
because they can school agers are getting better at like sequencing and yeah, just processing faster instead of like, okay, get your shoes. Okay, all right, put on your coat. Okay, we're gonna walk to the car. It's like, hey, shoes, coat, car, let's go. Like,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
sometimes not always. Um, but they're
Yes.
getting to be quicker thinkers in school age. They can process more things like that. And then finally, this one I think is fascinating when we do get to teach about language and reading up to third grade, so about halfway in
Mhm.
the middle childhood, kids are learning to read, right? They're doing lots of practicing spelling, letters, phonics, all of that great stuff. But after third grade, kids are kind of expected to read to learn. So to take in new
Exactly.
content in school, so that's why third grade is kind of such a pivotal age because we see how the teaching changes. And so that's a
Right.
really important part to understand about your school ager, right? Are they learning to read or is it now where they're now expected to be able to read in order to take in their information from school?
Yes. Yes, it's
Mhm.
such an important piece that sometimes we forget about that 3rd grade, and after that, they're starting to really need that reading skill to
Yes.
continue to learn in other areas. So,
Mhm. So we
yeah.
do. We really, yeah, we encourage it with our young kids, reading with them, helping them learn to
Mhm.
read, and then continuing to kind of build that love of reading
Exactly.
for sure.
Exactly. So the final category that we've been looking at for this particular age is social and emotional. And as parents, we may have to be ready to adjust to all of the different emotions that are becoming more and more apparent during this time frame. Right? We've had these toddler and preschool emotions, but in this middle childhood, we have a lot more words and naming of these
Mm,
emotions, right? They're just all of a sudden it's not just mad, it's, furious or irritated, right? So different
yes.
options for mad.
Yeah, the
Um
intricacies
the
of the
intricacies of it
emotions.
all, exactly.
Yes.
And we might need to be prepared to have to, keep lines of communications open
Mhm.
because we may find that the emotions don't match the situation. And we'll explore a little bit that when we talk about the
Mhm.
reality and strategies. But
Mhm.
during this age, it just becomes important for us to be ready. I think that those are some things I've thought through as you were speaking. It's okay, we have to be ready, ready for that quick thinking. We have to be ready for them to be frustrated with mastery. We have to be ready for these social emotional
It
types of things.
it's funny you say that because as you like, the word you were thinking is ready, and you were just talking about yeah, but, like, setting the stage. I
Exactly.
think of, like, we know there's gonna be a lot of change happening in puberty and in the teen years, and like, yeah, keeping those lines of communication open. We're
Mhm.
establishing that pattern in that relationship. I mean, hopefully we have been, but, we continue to do that in the school age years in preparation for what's to come.
Exactly.
Mhm.
They're going to be starting to develop their own, racial identity during this time. Their sense of self is really focusing on their competence, things how do they categorize their school competence? How do they
Mm.
categorize their, physical competence or their social competence? They start to have a sense of their place or their popularity, where they belong in groups. And
Mm.
they might still prefer similar gendered groups at this
For
age.
sure. And I think, yeah, I mean, I talked about mastery and competence goes right alongside that.
Mhm.
But that, I don't know, I just think of the big question they're kind of asking themselves is like, what am I good at?
Yeah.
Like, like, yeah, am I popular, which might mean I'm good socially? Like,
Mhm.
am I popular or am I athletic or am I smart? And I mean, we can encourage our kids to be more growth mindset and process oriented. Like, I work hard. Those are the kinds of skills we want to
Yes.
encourage in them rather
Mhm.
than, oh, you're smart or not smart. Right.
Right.
But they're really asking themselves and kind of establishing that sense of, I mean, even self-esteem
Oh,
around
yes.
so much of this. Like, this is who I
Yes.
am and who I will be. Yeah, they're
And
exploring it while establishing it.
they are, because when you think about this age, they're involved in so many different environments. The number of
Mm,
environments has just increased, whether it's the school, the neighborhood, extracurricular activities, familial types of things. Their boundaries have expanded. And so, where do they fit in all of these boundaries? And what's their
yes.
place becomes a big question in the social emotional development.
Definitely, yeah. Who am I? What am I good
Mhm.
at? Um, and even, these as they have those relationships with all of these different people, right? It's like, okay, who am I on the soccer team? Like, who am
Mhm.
I when I am like at theater practice? Who am I?
Mhm.
And yeah, so much of that sense of like, who am I? What am I good
Who am
at?
I? Yes.
Yeah. A lot of that
Yeah.
happening here. So I gotta ask, so knowing what we know about school agers and what we just walked through, in your own experience, what stands out to you about elementary age, middle and late childhood, school age, or
Mm.
whatever we say?
So, I've been trying to visualize each of my 3 children at this particular age, that 6 to 11. And I think one thing that really stands out to me is A, how different they are all individually, but also how different they are at the beginning of this stage and at the end.
Mm,
So each of them in their own right as a human being is different at this stage, but my oldest, she was a very different person at 6 than she was at 11.
Yes.
And my middle daughter, the same thing, different child. Yeah, and so when we come out of parenting, that
Yes.
school ager or that, middle childhood, the expectations we start with at 6 years old should be different than at 11 years
Mm,
old. And approaching our parenting during this age shouldn't start with, here they are as an 11-year-old. No, here
yes.
they are as a 6-year-old.
Mhm.
And we grow and change with them as they become the 11-year-old.
Definitely. And
Ooh,
I think you're bringing a great point. The CDC actually splits in terms of how they offer like parenting, positive parenting advice and those
mhm,
things. They split in middle and late childhood because there is a lot. Like this
there
is like
is.
5 years. A lot's happening in those 5 years.
Mhm.
In the first 5 years, we covered 3 different stages.
We did.
Right? Infant, toddler, preschool. Uh,
Exactly.
definitely.
And then
Mm.
it's 11, right? And we said the brain doesn't stop growing till 25. So at the end of this stage of development, their brain is still barely half built.
Oh yeah.
Their brain is barely half built. So there's a lot of learning and growing and changing left to do.
Mhm. They are getting more responsible, but at the same time, like,
Mhm.
hold on.
Yeah.
They got a lot of growing left to do.
Hold on.
Yeah. These are
How
not
about
just small adults.
no, they are not. We would like to, and sometimes by the time they're 11, they might be your size, so they might feel like a small adult, right? What about okay, so what about in your experience, what stands out for you?
Okay, well, not having a school ager yet,
Mhm.
but as we walk through these domains, these categories, and, like, understanding the different ways that our school age kids are developing, yeah, that, like, idea of, like, self-esteem and
Mm.
that idea almost the word that comes to mind is, like, fragile? Like,
Oh,
because it
yes.
is such a, like, big developmental time period for them getting a sense of, like, who they are, and yeah, this, like, "What am I good at?" That
Yeah.
really sticks out to me, and so that we're encouraging our kids' self-esteem, and I know sometimes self-esteem, like, I even just did it myself, like, I roll a little, like, "Ugh,
Yeah.
self-esteem." Like, people think it's, like, overblown and
Mhm.
all that, and there is a balance for sure. It's not that our kids will never have a hard time or that they need to be good at everything or
Yes.
anything like that, but that we are there cheering them along, encouraging them to take healthy risk, right? Like, it's good to try something new. We can do this. You know what? It's okay if we find out later, this isn't for me. I'm glad I tried it. And
Yes.
so encouraging that because, yeah, it's a very formative. That's kind of the word I want.
Ooh,
Like
that's a good word. So
formative for self esteem.
I I can literally remember something that happened when I was 9 maybe or 10.
Mm.
And that fragility, that fragile word has everything to do with what I believe my own capability is here as an adult, like in middle adulthood. This happened in those years that I suddenly began to believe that I could not do and would not be good at math. Now
Oh,
think about all the years that have come in between that time frame. But
yes.
that fragile time set the foundation for what I believed in myself
Yes.
about my skills in terms of arithmetic. Mm. Ah.
Mm. Yeah.
Arr.
Yes, I can think of saying the word fragile. I remember having a conversation with my mom because I was in, like, the kids choir or whatever, like, doing this little, like, middle s not quite middle school, I was a little younger than that. But I remember, like, "I'm an alto and not a soprano, mom."
Yes.
But and what I thought that meant, but, like, your sense of
Mhm.
identity is just so starting to be formed. Yeah, we talked about
Yes.
your racial identity, how you feel like you fit in,
Mhm.
and the skills that you have in these different areas that are honestly, I was gonna say seem like a big deal. They are. They
They
are a
are.
big deal to kids as they
Mhm.
figure out who they are. Those
Yes.
athletics or extracurriculars or, like, yeah, social skills in school, like,
And
oh.
those gender preferences, all of it.
Yes,
All of
all
it.
of it. Big
Yeah.
part of their identity, which I feel like identity we use is a word I associate more with, like, teens, but it's really here, like, we're starting to develop it's
Mhm.
here too.
It is. It is.
It's definitely here. So what
Yes.
do we do about that, right? We call ourselves the science of parenting, So
Mhm.
yeah, it's good to understand kind of what our kids are going through at this age, but also looking specifically like, okay, but I like what do I need to do now that I know that? And
Exactly.
so we got
Now that
we
I
get to part
know.
yes, now that I know I can do. We got to partner up with ISU professor Dr. Diana Lang, who has an open access book called Parenting in Diverse Contexts. So much great research based parenting information in there. She has these awesome one liners for guiding kids of different ages.
She
And so the
does.
one related to school-agers says that as parents, we increase our child's own responsibility for self control via the integration of previously developed internalized rules of conduct. Okay, when I read it like that, it sounds very technical and formal. Um, let's break it down a little bit. Let's unpack.
Ba-dum-bum. Sorry.
Yeah, break it down. I should beatbox. I
Yeah.
won't. I should though. I can't. But we are increasing the responsibility that we give to our child, right? With the choices they can handle, that problem solving, those goals that we talked about. So we increase that responsibility. But the way that we can do it is by helping them kind of understand the different expectations and appropriate behavior. Those rules that they learned as young kids of like, don't bite,
Mhm.
like try to share your stuff.
Right.
Like the rules of games that we play. So all these rules that they've been soaking in their whole life, they're going to start practicing those rules in other contexts, right? Lori said branching out. So
Branching
the
out.
rules in
Yes.
the neighborhood, the rules at practice, the rules at school, at home.
Mhm.
And so our job as parents, we get to help them kind of take on more responsibility by helping them understand and integrate those different rules across all the different places they're
Exactly.
exploring.
Exactly. And in the first episode this season, we brought up the work of Ellen Galinsky. And when you look at what she said about this age, she refers to this age stage as the interpretive stage. So
Hmm.
that plays right into that. We are helping children interpret all of the things that are happening to them, with them, about them, that they have control over, and interpret their responsibility in it. Help them interpret their self-control, help them interpret how to integrate, and honestly, just help them interpret all of these things that they're feeling. And
Yes.
we also need to think about what is our role in their environments. So our children
Mm.
are also interpreting how we as adults are behaving at their sporting events. They're
Mm.
interpreting our behavior with our friends
Mm.
or our frenemies. They're interpreting us and still watching everything that we're doing.
Yes, they're still sponges. And
Mhm.
the way we talk about their schoolwork, the way we talk
Yes.
about their teachers. I remember you talking
Mhm.
about that in a previous episode, um, of like, okay, the way I talk about their coach, they're
Yes.
probably internalizing that a little bit.
They
So, oh, the
are.
modeling, so true. And the interpreting, they're interpreting our
Yes.
behavior. They got us
They're
there.
looking for us as to how to treat others.
Yes, they really are.
They really are.
So we're digging into
Okay.
it. I'll say we're
We
digging into
are.
it a little bit, getting into
We
some of these
are.
positive parenting tips. We have holy cow, so many tips from
Yes.
the CDC for parenting kids of this age. We're gonna highlight just a few of those tips. And so we had several categories because we had to like lump them together. There were so many.
We did. So I'll run through the categories and then how about we run back to the beginning,
Yes, please.
point out a couple, and then put all of the information on our blog again, just like we
Yes,
did last
please.
week. So we'll put the CDC information on the blog, but we'll just highlight a couple of things here. So the categories for our positive parenting tips are going to be things in these arenas: continuing to connect with your child, teaching skills and mastery, guiding behavior to help them learn, supporting academic and social growth, and preparing them for what's about to happen in the coming teen years. So,
Mhm.
continuing to connect with your child. Tell me a little bit about that.
Mm. The tip that really stood out for me in this kind of area is just this idea of talking with your child because they're having more experiences outside of like our home and our specific circle. We still want to be connected with them. We still want them to
Mhm.
know, like, I'm still interested in what's going on with you, just because I'm not physically with you all the time like I wasn't when you were little. And so really connecting with our kids, having those conversations, doing things together, showing that affection. We just want to show them we're interested in their world.
Exactly. Connecting with them. Love that.
Mhm,
Okay, so the second category is teaching skills and mastery. And here's the deal, remember, age 6 through age 11,
mhm.
it is not going to be perfect, right?
Oof.
So helping them develop a sense of responsibility while at the same time understanding that the things they're responsible for, like, they're not gonna be perfect. Their brain still has another half to grow, right? So, things like involving them in household chores. Now, if you have a specific way that you'd like a household chore to be done, that might not be the chore to give them. Like, give them a chore that it's okay if it's not completed exactly to your specifications.
Mm.
It just remember, you're teaching them to develop a sense of responsibility. Just
Yes, they're
developing.
developing it. Yes. I'm
Yes.
thinking what you're thinking.
Yeah, sometimes, not always, right?
Yes, yes, and, I think about the ones that really with the skills is this is really can really start to think more about, like, goals and problem
Mm,
solving, and
yes.
so helping them set goals like, "Okay, you're working really hard on, basketball, on softball, on dance, on theater, like, what are you working on? What's the skill you're trying to build? Are you hoping to make a basket?" And so helping them develop those goals, but then on the flip side, helping them problem solve.
Yes.
Because sometimes that goal's not gonna go how we think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whether that's conflict with friends or whatever else, but, my favorite line, like, "So what's your plan?" And
Oh,
you're
I
like,
love
"Oh,"
that. I love hearing
like
you say that. What's your
and
plan?
so, like, "Oh, that's really hard that that's going on, that's maybe not what you expected. Like, what's your plan? What are you thinking?" You know?
Mhm.
Because they do. That
Exactly.
also helps with that responsibility of, like, "I can handle things. I can do it. They can do
Ex
it."
Yes. My
And then
favorite my favorite was telling my child when she said, "Hey, we're gonna go to Sophie's house, and Sophie happens to live 5 miles out of town. Sophie's mom's gonna bring us." And I remember specifically saying, "Great, and how are you getting home?" Like, "What's your plan?" You know?
Yes. So what are we doing after?
Never crossed their mind.
Yes. So then we move into this category of kind of guiding behavior, helping them
Yes.
learn appropriate behaviors. Another big thing, right? We're always working on this in our parenting.
Yes, guiding their behavior. What do you think I'm gonna say about guiding behavior? Oh, it
I
totally
know.
involves respect. Like,
Respect.
not only respecting others, but respecting yourself, respecting the children, respecting the adults respecting the children, and having, like, legitimately real conversations about that word. What does respect mean? What does it look like? What does it sound like? How did it feel when someone didn't give you respect? There is no time like this age group right there to start to teach them about respect, because they're not always within your environment. They're in all of these
Mhm.
other environments, and so they're going to be practicing levels of respect when you're not there.
For
And what do you want
sure.
that to look like?
Mhm. And some of the way we do that, is by I mean, we talked about the modeling, but also how we guide them. And if we
Mhm.
go back to last season, how we mentor them, that was one of our RP 3M, or,
Yes.
one of the M's, but how we mentor them. And so, there's a tip here about making our rules and our expectations really clear.
Mhm.
Also clarifying what we do not want them to do, right? What the undesired behaviors are, making sure we
Exactly.
do offer those clear expectations. And then because it's sometimes not always, right? Because they're
Yes.
sometimes not going to follow our expectations, using positive discipline techniques and guidance techniques. Because really
Yes.
our goal is to guide and protect them. And so not focusing so much on the punishment aspect, but more on the positive discipline.
It is, and this is a great space to talk about the fact that they're old enough to help create those guidance plans.
Hmm.
So if there is something that they didn't follow through on, you can ask them, "Well, what do you think the consequence should be?"
Mhm.
well, they could come up with the consequence. They could come up with the plan ahead of time. If you have a particular thing that you struggle with your child, sit down and talk about it with them in a time when neither of you is emotional,
Mhm.
and have a conversation and help them come up with the plan for the consequences when this, type of behavior happens or this follow through doesn't exist.
Yeah, when the expectation's not met, for sure, for
Mhm.
sure. So our next
So,
one,
yes, so the
I
next
keep talking
category,
over you.
it's all right. It's been a day.
It
So the
has.
next one is support academic and social growth. And I love what you said about this one, so I'm gonna give this one to you.
Okay. The word that stood out to me through so many of these was just involved. Like,
Mhm.
as a parent, we're getting involved, we're encouraging our kids to be involved, and and I think respecting whatever the level that is for you and your child. Some kids would enjoy being at a practice, however many nights a week. And some kids like, I want to stay home. I don't enjoy
Exactly.
like too much physical activity. I'm tired after school. And so getting a sense of what kind of involvement makes sense for your child to take some of
Mhm.
that healthy risk, try new things, but also for you, showing your child that you care about their world by being involved in it.
Yes.
Whether coaching, PTA, just asking questions or being present when things are going on, finding ways that make sense for you and for your specific reality and your family to be
And your
involved
temperament and their
and your
temperament,
temperament.
right? Yes, exactly. And then the last category is to start to think about how can you prepare them for the changes that are going to be happening in their preteen and teen years. And a really important message from us as well as the CDC is this age is not too early to start having those conversations. Start
Mhm.
having conversations about what your family values and beliefs are when it comes to risk-taking behaviors, like alcohol or drugs or smoking, those things that impact physical health, decision making with friends and peers. This is the age to start having those conversations. It is not too early.
Mm-mm.
Children are exposed to many things during this age when they are not in your own home environment. So you need to
Definitely.
be brave and have those conversations.
And I think talking, I love keeping it in the context of we're talking about our family values
Mhm.
because that goes across, yeah, peer pressure situations, giving them a heads up for that. What they see on the media, right? At this age, we have less control of that. What their
Exactly.
friends say, what they hear their coaches say, their teachers say. And so keeping it in the perspective of family values around those things keeps it an open conversation. But then the other thing we also talk about uh, puberty is gonna be
Yes.
coming in the preteen, and honestly, for some kids, right, it's gonna be coming in late
Right.
childhood, and
Exactly.
so giving them a heads up on, that these changes could be coming. We don't want them to be surprised and then, feeling secretive about that,
Yes.
and so helping them understand how things will be changing for them in their body, in their emotions, with their friends, all that kinda stuff, and so, again, just getting them ready so they feel prepared for the changes that they're gonna be taking on and the peer like we said, whether it's risky choices, healthy development, whatever it is, it's not too early to start talking about it for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have some resources to share as well.
Oh, we do. So now they're a little older. I've talked about our Ages and Stages newsletters
Mhm.
before, written by our fabulous colleague Lisa Ursterreich. And just there's some on school age kids that just help us understand. It's like a front and back sheet. Like it really summarizes it really nicely. Our kids' development, who are school age kids. But another one that I really love is for actually from our 4-H colleagues. We know that in school age is kind of a big question we tend to have is like when is my kid ready to be home by themselves? Like for a few
Exactly.
minutes or for a few hours or however long. And so our 4-H colleagues have a really great opportunity called On Their Own and Okay. And
Yes.
so there's information for your kids to participate in to get a better sense of like how to be safe when they're home alone. And then also a like a part for you as a parent to give you information about how to make that decision safely and with your specific kid in mind. So yeah, on
Exactly.
their own and okay. And then our Ages and Stages publications, great resources that are research based to tap
They
into.
are. They are. And you can find the ages and stages on the right-hand side of our website. If you just go over
Mhm.
and click the links over there, you'll see them down the right-hand side. So, we debated today whether we were going to invite our producer Kenzie DeYoung on. We noticed earlier today that her internet wasn't working very well, and we thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to just practice not having a stop,
We don't
breathe,
need it.
talk moment. That moment in our episode where we give our producer an opportunity to ask us a question kind of off the cuff, one that we don't know about. And she comes in and helps us to take a breath and think about our topic, just from a different perspective. Hi, Kens.
Comes in and I was
Here she
like,
comes.
and then it automatically, for some reason, put me in the middle of you two rather than on the
Oh,
side like it usually does. So I moved myself over because it felt
you're like, this is weird.
if we were in person, I'd be like, Mackenzie, Lori.
Kenzie, Lori, here we are.
Oh, you talked about this a little bit. And to be fair, I had this question like ready to go in the bag. You didn't really talk about it as much beforehand, and then you started talking about it a little more in depth in the actual recording of the podcast. So I would like to talk a little bit more about organized activities. So this is the age when our kids really are getting into those organized activities. We have, you know, usually they're involved in like things like dance or other sports. I know I did basketball when I was a kid. My nephew's in taekwondo, or 4-H starts during this time. Arts, like Mackenzie mentioned, music, that sort of thing. How does a parent, and you kind of touched on this already, but how does a parent decide like how many activities they should get their kids involved in, or they should let their kids be involved in, or
Mhm.
like, or do I just pick one? Do I let them be involved in everything? How do we make those decisions?
I have an
Oof.
I have thoughts on this.
Okay, good. Good.
Because I have a 4.5-year-old right now.
Uh-huh.
And so this is a literal conversation in our house.
Sure.
Like regularly of like, oh, there's an opening. Like, oh, you could sign up for this. Oh, you could sign up for this. Oh,
Mhm.
do that. Here's the newsletter from school. You could do this. And I'm like, so my answer is actually like it really super depends on your reality.
It does.
So some of the things we're considering in our family in order to make this decision,
Mhm.
the financial commitment.
Mhm.
We are not willing to put more money into an extracurricular activity than is reasonable for our family. And so the financial commitment is a big consideration for us. The time commitment, part of that is because sometimes, I mean, you guys know our job can be somewhat irregular in hours.
Right.
Mhm.
And for me, I didn't want to be signing my child up for an activity that I didn't know if I'd be able to attend.
Mhm.
Sure.
Because that's how I want to be involved with at this age in the season of life that we're in. And so your time commitment, if you have a parent that's working overnight shifts, like it's a very different thing than if you're working a 9 to 5 or if you're working part-time or 60 hours a week. And so, I mean, and even like a stay-at-home parent, there's still time commitment factors. And so the time commitment and then the interest of your child.
Yes.
I did not do dance. I did like basketball, softball, volleyball, all of these things. But if my daughter is interested in dance or if my son is interested in dance, and so that is a thing that, as our parent, I think we envision as parents, like my husband talks about that. Like
Yeah.
I pictured being their T-ball coach.
Mhm.
Like I pictured being there. And so sometimes that can be a little bit of like oh, you don't want to do this thing? I've pictured this thing. But following their interests, but keeping it reasonable. It's okay for you to say, like, we can't commit to dance, soccer, theater, and right.
Right.
Like, let's try this right now.
Yes.
But it's okay for you to have boundaries as a parent around that.
It is, and I think that there is a lot of we need to go back to season 2, parental shaming, judging,
Yes.
unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
And so I would say that we need to look at who is really interested in that activity. Is
Mhm.
it us or the child? And then B, it's important to continue to watch and observe during that activity. And so let's say that you do pick a couple of activities and all of a sudden you find that your child and you are maybe more irritable with each other, or you
Mhm.
find that your child is kind of shutting down. Maybe they're getting more ill more frequently. And so it's really important to be able to be open to the suggestion that maybe it's too many if
Mhm.
you have more than one, and maybe one is too many at the beginning of this stage. Some children
Yes.
are not going to their temperament, they're just not the highly active child. And so, recognizing that and then being okay with saying, not right now. It doesn't have to be not ever, and
Yes.
I also recognize that, there are some activities that if you don't enroll your child by early and middle childhood, they can't play on a certain team or be on us at a certain level. And we also have to be okay with that. We also have to
Mhm.
be okay with, you know what? It's all right that this isn't the way we envisioned.
Mhm.
The last thing I would maybe toss out there is the idea that it's okay not to finish,
Mm.
especially if we are seeing, you know, very strong reactions. And I say this in that idea of I remember, you know, people, whether it was other families or other students or other parents saying, you may not quit mid-season.
Mhm.
And I understand that. I totally understand the idea of following through. But at the same time, being very observant to recognize the signs of if we don't step back from this, it will cause more harm than the good of the lesson of following through.
Mm.
Right. And so it's so easy before we're in a situation to set hard and fast rules
Mhm.
that sometimes the most important thing we can do is allow ourselves to change our minds and not have such rigid rules about things we haven't experienced yet.
Are you saying I have to be flexible?
Oh, Kenzie, you
Oh,
have to be
no. Oh, no.
flexible.
Temperament thing.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's a really great question, and it's one I think we struggle with as parents to,
Mhm.
how much and when to say no, and
Mhm.
and I wish I love a framework. We know that. I
Right.
love when there's like a super clear cut, and it just really depends. And yeah, I think you make a great point about the judgment of it does feel like a lot of pressure, social pressure from other parents,
Mhm.
family members, whoever it might be. But ultimately, only you and your family know your very specific reality that affects that decision. And it's okay for
Exactly.
you to say, I can't commit to this. Like, that's not
Yes.
realistic for me. And then your kids can help you problem solve too, right? Get those school agers
Yes.
involved in this decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I this is a high school example, but, um, I basically had the choice in high school to do dance or everything else because
Mm.
dance is pretty expensive with costumes and everything, and that was one of those that, like, I had to make a decision, but it was my decision, as a
Yeah.
younger
Mhm.
school ager, it might be, um, if you can only afford one, dance or all of this
Yes.
you wanna be involved in, that sort of a thing that might
Mhm.
be, part of that decision making with your child too, so.
Mhm.
And, a 6-year-old really is not capable of making that decision on their own.
Right.
And it
Yes.
especially then having to have that firm stance of, well, you decided, so now
Yeah.
we're going to follow through.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
but, you know, detrimentally, they're not sleeping at night and they're anxious and they're anxiety ridden over, having to now show up and that, they're 6.
Right.
So
Mhm.
we do need to have some flexible thinking.
Definitely. And especially, does a 6-year-old have cognitive capacity to understand the very tangible
Right.
responsibilities and having to
Right.
come and like, I can't stay home Like, I wanna stay
Right.
home.
Yeah.
Like, so understanding their
Yes.
development does help inform that picture too. And I will say, we have been getting nudges to get our child involved in things at a younger age, and I've been like, "No, not yet." Like, "No,
Yes.
not yet. I'm not there
Yeah.
yet." Yeah, and, like, literally, I'm not
Yeah.
there yet, but
Yes.
also, like, my child likes to be at home. My child will
Mhm.
ask me if we, like, stop on the way home from school or, like, from picking up from childcare kinda stuff. Can't like, "Don't stop. Let's go home."
Let's go
Like,
home.
and all of those things roll into this decision.
Mhm. They do. Yes.
Good question. Good question.
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Yes.
How do we could go into that a little more deeply too? Because I was worried when you started mentioning it in the tips that maybe
They blew my question.
Yes. Thanks, Kens. So yeah, that's our producer, Mackenzie DeYoung. She comes in our flagship parenting strategy of stop, taking a breath, and then talking. We like to take
Mhm.
pause there and think about what's really important here. And so we
Mhm.
know with our school-agers, that is a big question that we have. So
It is.
we walked through, we know we're looking at middle and late childhood, school-agers, 6 to 11-year-olds, talking about some of the domains, the cognitive changes, the social changes, emotional, physical, all of these things that are still going on. They're not even halfway there yet in their brain development, right, Lori?
They are not even halfway there.
Yep, they've got a lot of years left to develop, which is hard because I think they get a little more responsibility and they seem more responsible. And it's like, come on. It's like, well,
Exactly.
still a kid. But so
Yes.
much great stuff here. Great tips for helping our kids kind of interpret the world around them.
It is. So next time we're going to talk about preteen, like not teen
Yes.
yet. So,
Mhm.
you said we walked through 5 years here from 6 to 11. We're actually really just going to kind of be talking about that, 11 to 12-year-old next time,
Mhm.
that preteen.
Young
And
teen.
so, come back and hang out with us. And thank you for joining us today on the Science of Parenting. Remember to subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can watch the show on video each week and join us on Facebook and Twitter at Science of Parent to see our content in your feed.
Yes, please do come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Lori Kothals and Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.